Welcome back. We're going to continue the reading of The Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, edited by Amy Jacques Garvey. If the white man has the idea of a white God, let him worship his God as he desires. If the yellow man's God is of his race, let him worship his God as he sees fit. We, as Negroes, have found a new ideal. Whilst our God has no color, yet it is human to see everything through one's own spectacles, and since the white people have seen their God through white spectacles, we have only now started out, late though it be, to see our God through our own spectacles. The God of Isaac and the God of Jacob, let him exist for the race that believes in the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. We Negroes believe in the God of Ethiopia, the everlasting God, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, the one God of all ages. That is the God in whom we believe, but we shall worship him through the spectacles of Ethiopia. Chapter 4. The Slave Trade. 300 years ago, no Negroes were to be found in this Western Hemisphere. We were to be found exclusively in Africa. Just about that time, a large number of white people, called colonists, settled in America. They desired laborers to help them in the country's development. They turned to Asia and were unable to use the yellow man. At that time, a man named John Hawkins, afterwards knighted, asked permission of Queen Elizabeth of England to take the blacks from Africa into her colonies of America and the West Indies and use them in their development. The Queen asked, "What consideration will you give them?" Hawkins said, "They will be civilized and Christianized in the colonies, for in their own country they are savages and barbarians." Under these pretenses, the British Queen signed a charter empowering John Hawkins and others to remove from Africa millions of our forefathers, men, women, and children, who were sold in the slave markets of the southern states of America and West Indies. Parents were separated from children, husbands from wives, all scattered in this Western Hemisphere to work in the cotton fields of the southern states of America and the sugar plantations of the West Indies. The Negroes who were sold in the West Indies remained as slaves for 230 years, and those sold in America for 250 years. The West Indian Negroes were emancipated 85 years ago by Queen Victoria of England, and the American Negroes 58 years ago by Abraham Lincoln. We, the Negroes in the Western Hemisphere, are descendants of those Africans who were enslaved and transported to these shores, where they suffered, bled, and died to make us what we are today, civilized, Christian, free men. Should we not, therefore, turn our eyes towards Africa, our ancestral home, and free it from the thraldom of alien oppression and exploitation? I got some words about that. There definitely were black people here before the white colonizer, and it's very important to understand that he was working with the best information that he had at the time. And we give thanks to people like Ivan Sans Sertima, who's brought forth new truths for us. But let's continue reading. Negroes' status under alien governments. Within modern times, the Negro race has not had any real statesmen, and the masses of our people have always accepted the intentions and actions of the statesmen and leaders of other races as being directed in our interest as a group in conjunction with the interest of others. Such a feeling on our part causes us to believe that the Constitution of the United States was written for Negroes, as well as the constitutions of England, France, Italy, Germany, and other countries where Negroes happen to have their present domicile either as citizens or as subjects. That we suffer so much today under whatsoever flag we live is proof positive that constitutions and laws, when framed by the early advocates of human liberty, never included and were never intended for us as a people. It is only a question of sheer accident that we happen to be fellow citizens today with the descendants of those who, Through their advocacy, descendants laid the foundation for human rights. So this brings us to the point where, as a people, we can expect very little from the efforts of present-day statesmen of other races, in that their plans, as far as advantages to be derived therefrom are concerned, are laid only in the interest of their own people, and not in the interest of Negroes. Hence it is imperative that Negroes as a people evolve just at this time a statesmanship sufficiently able to cope with the designs and movements that are being made, that will, except we prevent it, ultimately mean our doom and destruction. The Negro as an industrial makeshift. The Negro's property today, limited as it is based upon the foundation laid by an alien race that is not disposed to go out of its way to prepare for the economic existence of anyone else but itself. Therefore, our present prosperity as far as employment goes is purely accidental. It is as accidental today as it was during the War of 1914 to 18, where colored men were employed in different occupations, not because they were wanted, but because they were filling the places of men of other races who were not available at that time. Negroes are still filling places, and as time goes on and the age grows older, our occupations will be gone from us, because those for whom we filled the places will soon appear, and as they do, we shall gradually find our places among the millions of permanent unemployed. The thing for the Negro to do, therefore, is to adjust his own economic present in readiness for the future. A race that is solely dependent upon another for its economic existence sooner or later dies. As we have in the past been living upon the mercies shown us by others and by the chances obtainable, and have suffered therefrom, so will we in the future suffer if an effort is not made now to adjust our own affairs. Lack of cooperation in the Negro race. It is hard, so difficult to find men who will stick to a purpose, who will maintain a principle for the worth of that principle, for the good of that purpose. And if there is a race that needs such men in the world today, God Almighty knows it is the race of which I am a member. The race needs men of vision and ability, men of character, and above all, men of honesty, and that is so hard to find. The greatest stumbling block in the way of progress in the race has invariably come from within the race itself. The monkey wrench of destruction as thrown into the cog of Negro progression is not thrown so much by the outsider as by the very fellow who is in our fold, and who should be the first to grease the wheel of progress rather than seeking to impede it. But notwithstanding the lack of sympathetic cooperation, I have one consolation, that I cannot get away from the race. And so long as I am in the race, and since I have sense and judgment enough to know what affects the race affects me, it is my duty to help the race to clear itself of those things that affect us in common. White man's solution for the Negro problem in America. Immediately after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in America, the white man started to think how he could solve the new problem of the Negro. He saw that the Negro could not be slaughtered by wholesale killing, and that it would be a blot on American civilization. He therefore had to resort to some means of solving the problem, which meant the extinction of the Negro in America. The plan he decided on was as follows. Now that America is undeveloped and we have but 34 million in population, 30,000 being white and 4 million being black, a number not large enough to develop the country as we want it, we will use the 4,000 blacks until we have built up the country sufficiently, and when we no longer need their labor, we will throw them off and let them starve economically and die of themselves or immigrate elsewhere, and we care not where. Then no one can accuse us of being inhuman to the Negro, as we shall not have massacred him. A hearty welcome is extended to white people from all parts of the world to come to settle in America. They come in by thousands every month. Why? The idea is to build up a vast white population in America so as to make the white people independent of Negro labor, thereby depriving them of the means of livelihood and wherewithal to buy bread, which means that in a short while they will die of starvation. Those of us who study industrial conditions among the race must have noticed that Negroes in America have been thrown out of jobs that they occupied formerly and their positions taken by European immigrants. Now, if the white people have not reached the apex of their intention industrially, as far as the development of the country is concerned, and they have exhibited such a degree of prejudice since they start their plan, how much more prejudiced will not become in the next 100 years when their population will be doubled by immigration and birth rate. This is the problem the Negro has to face in America. The True Solution of the Negro Problem, 1922. As far as the Negroes are concerned, in America we have the problem of lynching, peonage, and disenfranchisement. In the West Indies, South and Central America, we have the problem of peonage, serfdom, industrial and political government inequality. In Africa, we have not only peonage and serfdom, but outright slavery, racial exploitation, and alien political monopoly. We cannot allow a continuation of these crimes against our race. As 400 million men, women, and children, worthy of the existence given us by the divine Creator, we are determined to solve our own problem by redeeming our motherland Africa from the hands of alien exploiters, and found there a government, a nation of our own, strong enough to lend protection to the members of our race scattered all over the world, and to compel the respect of the nations and races of the earth. Do they lynch Englishmen, Frenchmen, Germans, or Japanese? No. And why? Because these people are represented by great governments, mighty nations and empires, strongly organized. Yes, and ever ready to shed the last drop of blood and spend the last penny in the national treasury to protect the honor and integrity of a citizen outraged anywhere. Until the Negro reaches this point of national independence, all he does as a race will count for naught, because the prejudice that will stand out against him, even with his ballot in his hand, and with his industrial progress to show, will be of such an overwhelming nature as to perpetuate mob violence and mob rule, from which he will suffer, and which he will not be able to stop with his industrial wealth and with his ballot. You may argue that he can use industrial wealth and his ballot to force the government to recognize him, but he must understand that the government is the people. The majority of the people dictate the policy of the government, and if the majority is against a measure, a thing, or a race, then the government is impotent to protect that measure, thing, or race. If the Negro were to live in the Western Hemisphere for another 500 years, he would still be outnumbered by other races who are prejudiced against him. He cannot resort to the government for protection, for government will be in the hands of the majority of the people who are prejudiced against him. Hence, for the Negro to depend on the ballot and his industrial progress alone will be hopeless, as it does not help him when he is lynched, burned, Jim Crowed, and segregated. The future of the Negro, therefore, outside of Africa, spells ruin and disaster. Ain't that a word? Let's review real quick. Essentially, what he's saying is, across the Western Hemisphere, we're seeing patternized similarities in regards to how the African is seen amongst the culture as well as the government. And although we question why other races don't deal with that same prejudice, although we see that they do deal with prejudice, it's because those people are subconsciously respected because of their state of government in their homeland. Furthermore, when the African person in the Western Hemisphere thinks that if they just make as much money as they want to, or as long as they vote, they'll be able to somehow create equality for themselves. They're disregarding the fact that the government will always be a reflection of the people, and as long as the culture that the people uphold is something that is against them, they will never be able to rise up against the culture of the people. There is no government that could fix that culture, right? So if the African wants to exist outside of Africa peacefully, then there needs to be a government positioned in Africa that is strong enough to lend itself all across the world when something happens to the African. That's the only way that we can truly secure our safety physically. Expecting that these governments that were built but never created with us in mind to protect us is to ignore what exists and to completely lean on hope. Let's continue reading. White propaganda about Africa. This propaganda of disassociating Western Negroes from Africa is not a new one. For many years, white propagandists have been printing tons of literature to impress scattered Ethiopia, especially that portion within their civilization, with the idea that Africa is a despised place, inhabited by savages and cannibals, where no civilized human being should go, especially black civilized human beings. This propaganda is promulgated for the cause that is being realized today. That cause is colonial expansion for the white nations of the world. At this present time, the world is not producing enough food to feed all its inhabitants. The strong are fed and the weak starve. That is why there are famines in certain countries, even though those countries produce certain things for human consumption. The strong go there, take the food, and send it home, just as how Great Britain and France go into Africa, take out the products and ship them away to feed Europeans and leave Africans to starve. The strong will always live at the expense of the weak. This rush for territory, this encroachment on lands, is only a desire for the strong races, especially the white race, to get hold of these portions and bits of land necessary for their economic existence, knowing well that in another 200 years there will not be enough supplies in the world for all of its inhabitants. The weaker peoples must die. At present, Negroes are the weakest people, and if we do not get power and strength now, we shall be doomed to extermination. The 3 stages of the Negro in contact with the white man. I believe, as far as the Negro is concerned politically, that there are 3 stages related to our contact with the white man. The first stage in the life of the Negro in this Western Hemisphere was the stage when the white man shackled us in Africa and brought us here, and kept us for 250 years. During this period, we worked and received no recompense, no pay for our labor, and we were satisfied because of the white man's Christian teachings. Learn to labor and to wait. The second stage was the thing called emancipation, which we have enjoyed for 58 years. This stage came when they gave us partial freedom and a petty existence by way of wages, and we were satisfied during that stage to do just what they told us to do. We worked for small wages and voted Republican, Democratic, and so forth until after 58 years we discovered that a change was necessary. Now we have entered into the third stage of our existence, wherein we say to the white man, after 250 years of slavery and 58 years of partial freedom under your leadership, we are going to try but 50 years under our own direction. This new stage calls for all the manhood within the race and means that we must throw off all the conditions that affect us in the first and second stages and go out and do. Acquit ourselves like men in the economy, industrial, and political arena. I should talk about the 4th and the 5th stage, huh? Maybe in a different video. Let's continue reading. Booker T. Washington's program. The world held up the great sage of Tuskegee, Booker T. Washington, as the only leader of the race. They look forward to him and his teachings as the leadership of all times, not calculating that the industrially educated Negro would himself evolve a new idea after having been trained by the sage of Tuskegee. The world satisfied itself to believe that succeeding Negro leaders would follow absolutely the teachings of Washington. Unfortunately, the world is having a rude awakening, in that we are evolving a new ideal. The new ideal includes the program of Booker T. Washington and has gone much further. Things have changed wonderfully since Washington came on the scene. His vision was industrial opportunity for the Negro, but the sage of Tuskegee has passed off the stage of life and left behind a new problem, a problem that must be solved, not by the industrial leader only, but by the political and military leaders as well. If Washington had lived, he would have had to change his program. No leader can successfully lead this race of ours without giving an interpretation of the awakened spirit of the new Negro, who does not seek industrial opportunity alone, but a political voice. The world is amazed at the desire of the Negro, for with his strong voice he is demanding a place in the affairs of the world. Belief that the race problem will adjust itself, a fallacy. Some of our leaders in the Negro race flatter themselves into believing that the problem of black and white in America will work itself out, and all that the Negro has to do is to be humble, submissive, and obedient, and everything will work out well in the sweet by and by. But the keen student will observe that a terrible mistake was made between 40 and 50 years ago when black men were elected to legislative assemblies all over the country, especially in the southern states, and even at the national capital when representatives of this race occupied seats in Congress. The mistake was made as far as the white people were concerned. There was a state of disorganization in the nation, and in that state certain things happened by mere chance. In the chance, dozens of black men became senators and congressmen. This opened up the eyes of the white nation, the possibility of the black man governing the white man in these United States of America. The possibility of the black man making laws to govern the white man, this possibility drove them almost to madness. And suddenly, rejecting the spirit of the Constitution and the Declaration of Lincoln that all men are created equal, hence a determination was arrived at, that never again would it be possible for the race of slaves to govern the race of masters within the United States of America. Some of us believe that this slave race of ours will live in the United States of America and in the future again become lawmakers of the white race, our slave masters of 60 years ago. Nothing of the kind has happened in all human history. There is not one instance where a slave race living in the same country, within the same bounds as the race of masters that enslaved them, and being in numbers less than the race of masters, has ever yet ruled and governed the masters. It has never been so in history, and it will never be so in the future. The hidden spirit of America is determined that it shall never be, caring not what hopes and promises we get. But history has recorded where a race of slaves through evolution, through progress, has risen to the heights where they ruled and dominated those who once enslaved them. But that race of slaves has always had to betake itself to other habitats, usually their own native land, and there, apart from those who once enslaved them, developed a power of their own, a strength of their own, and in the higher development of that strength and of that power, they, like others, have made conquests, and the conquests sometimes have enabled them to enslave those who once enslaved them. So for us to encourage the idea that one day Negroes will rise to the highest in administration of this white government is only encouraging a vain hope. The only wise thing for us as ambitious Negroes to do is to organize the world over and build up for the race a mighty nation of our own in Africa. And this race of ours that cannot get recognition and respect in the country where we were slaves, by using our own ability, power, and genius, would develop ourselves in another country and our habitat a nation of our own, and be able to send back from that country, from that native habitat, to that country where we were once slaves, representatives of our race that would get as much respect as any other ambassador from any other race or nation. It feels like I wrote this book. I cannot stress this enough. It feels like I wrote it. Examples of white Christian control of Africa. Do I want to keep reading? What you think? I think I'm going to stop. Page 37, which is smart because last time I stopped at 29. Yeah, we're going to stop. It's probably going to be one of the shorter videos. But that was packed. You know what I'm saying? I definitely want to make other videos to really expound upon what he's saying. But essentially, and I think what he's referring to is the enslavement of the English by the Romans, where they didn't just rise up and become leaders of Rome, or they didn't rise up and become representatives in the Roman government. That wasn't the case. What did happen was they left Rome, went back to England, built themselves up, and over the conquest of whoever they chose to be, right? The English people, they chose to be conquistadors, you know, to go and try to dominate just as the Romans did. And I want to also be very truthful about the fact that when Africans go back to Africa and build up the African government, it will only work under God. It will only work if we truly take heed to the extensive history of patterns that let us know that we should not become slavers. I think that is very obvious, but I guess for people who may decide that they want to pretend as if they know better, then they'll pretend as if they don't get that. We should be the world's protectors against all types of trafficking, because we know that plight too well. We have been the ultimate victims of it, so we should be the ultimate protectors against it. That's only it's only right. It's only just. But yeah, we give thanks to Marcus Garvey. We give thanks. Appreciate you for watching. Have a great day.